Imagine a winter storm hits your area and the utilities are cut. Water, natural gas, electricity, they're all gone. If it's only out for a few hours, not a problem. Kick back, enjoy some hot chocolate, and kick your feet up next to the fireplace. But after a few hours, you begin to notice that the power is not going to come back on. Your phone is almost out of batteries, and the approaching night with record temperatures is about here. And to make matters worse, the roads are now impassable. Sure, the first day or two would be rough, but what happens when this stretches into weeks or worse? Then what? What items would you want to have on hand to ensure you can make it through? In this video, I'm going to detail the items that you can start picking up now that fall into 8 primary categories, some of which you probably already have, and a few you probably don't. So let's jump in. Safety. I purposely chose safety as the first category because it's so critical that we have essential items in place. Now, the first one we want to cover is a fire extinguisher. Now, look, even if you're very careful and you don't start a fire, you have to remember that your neighbors, they may not be as prepared as you are. When electrical systems fail and people turn to fire as their main heating source and lighting source, the chances of a fire increases exponentially. You also have to remember that you are your own first responder when the grid is down. So my encouragement is to at least invest in 1 or 2 of these kind of basic household fire extinguishers that you can pick up at places like Costco or your local Home Depot or other hardware store. Don't get one of those little cheap fire extinguishers that is, the size of a can of hairspray. Actually invest in a good solid option like this. Now, the next one that we're going to discuss is a carbon monoxide alarm. As you can see here on the back, this is one that actually has batteries, and you can find the ones that have both the wall plug-in and the batteries. But again, the goal here is to remember, if the grid were to go down, power is out, utilities are out, we're going to need to be able to power this. Now, it's usually not the event itself that unfortunately kills people. It's the mistakes that they make afterwards. How often do you turn on the news and you see that after a major disaster, people start running generators, which is fine, but a lot of times people make mistakes, run it too close to their house or some other area that they end up inhaling the fumes, carbon monoxide, and they pass as a result. Also, people will begin to burn things in their homes. We're going to talk in a moment about using things like, cooking stoves and other options. And we have to be careful and think through and make sure that we protect against carbon monoxide poisoning, which is fatal. Now, the next issue or the next item is a good first aid kit. Now, this category of safety is not complete without some type of basic kit. You can pick up these usually online, at your local hardware store. There's so many places that you'll see basic first aid kits. Now, my encouragement to you, apart from just getting a standard first aid kit, and I can't emphasize this enough, is to get a good tourniquet. This is called a CAT tourniquet, C-A-T. And what you'll notice is a lot of time on Amazon, you'll see these and you'll think, oh, okay, great. They're fine, right? I can get these. But if you go on YouTube and you look at how many videos that people do, well, they'll buy one of these off of Amazon, they tie it around their arm, they start tightening down, and it breaks because they're Chinese knockoffs. So what we want to do is there's a website, and I'll link to it below. It's a North American Rescue website. I don't have any commission or affiliate or relationship with them. I'm just telling you, they're in the industry recognized as the go-to to pick up one of these CAT tourniquets. So my encouragement to you is invest in a good CAT tourniquet. They're about $30 or so, but we want to use this to supplement and make sure that if someone gets injured and the grid is down and help is not on the way, that you can take care of a potentially bleed out situation. Download the Extreme Weather Survival Guide today. I'll post a link in the description and comments section below, or visit cityprepping.com/weather for a free guide to help you set up your preps to survive even the worst weather events. Warmth. The first item that we'll discuss is a sleeping bag. Now remember, the temperature that these are rated for, it's not for comfort, but what it's rated for to basically keep you alive. Also, you do not want to sleep directly on the floor with these. If you get into a sleeping bag and you're, sleeping on the floor or something like that, you're going to need to put some type of blanket, a thick blanket, a pad, or something underneath. Otherwise, the ground will just pull the heat right out of you pretty quickly. I had a subscriber last year when I pointed out sleeping bags. They wanted to encourage me to make sure that I encourage my audience, whenever you get inside of a sleeping bag, remember, don't put on a bunch of clothing, like wearing a jacket and other items, because the sleeping bag, the way they work is essentially your body passes heat inside and it forms a cocoon where it keeps that heat inside. But if you're already wearing a lot of clothing and you get inside a sleeping bag, it's just not going to warm up. So what you want to do is effectively just wear a single layer, something light, kind of a midweight base layer. I've got some insulating clothes that I wear, like long johns, that whenever I get in a sleeping bag, that's all I wear. It's breathable, so I don't get moisture buildup in the clothing, but yet it lets the heat get into the sleeping bag. All right, now the next item is a wool blanket. Now, there's a reason why these continue to be popular. It's because nothing can really beat them. They're a natural, material. They offer natural insulation. They're moisture wicking, temperature regulating. They're durable. They're hypoallergenic. They're odor resistant. You could go on and on. They have a lot of great qualities, but they really make an excellent option. I keep these out in my garage with all our camping gear. I keep them stored away in a tote that we have on standby if we have to leave. And they're not cheap, but they're something that can last for a long time. They're portable, and my encouragement is, especially in the winter, have these available, at least one or more, enough for whoever needs them. Now, the next item is an electric blanket or pad. Why do I bring these up? Well, you can really keep your core and extremities, keep the temperatures a few degrees warmer than without. And the advantage of these is they don't really draw a lot of power compared to something like a space heater, which we'll discuss momentarily about how do we actually go about powering these if you're bringing up a heating source that's, has to be plugged in. I'll talk about that momentarily. But these are relatively light on how much they need to power. So definitely a good option to have. Now, another one is a hand warmer. And these are actually electric rechargeable hand warmers, believe it or not. So again, when we talk about power sources in a moment, we'll discuss how we would go about powering these and using that. But keeping your extremities, your hands, your feet warm, it's going to be invaluable. Now, the next item up is some type of hot water bottle, a bladder like this. Again, it doesn't have to be a metal bottle, but I've got some here that are. And filling these up with hot water and actually sliding this inside of either your clothing, a sleeping bag, under a blanket, this is really going to allow you to get by during freezing temperatures in a cold night. Now, obviously, you're not going to want metal on your skin or something like this, so you can slide a sock over it and actually, again, stick it in your sleeping bag or wherever it is you're sleeping to have this, output the heat overnight. Now, the last item, this is not an item that you need to go down and buy, but your pet. Remember, if it's really cold out, keeping your pet sleeping on your bed is obviously you're going to transfer that, or they'll transfer the heat over to you. Clothing. Now, regarding clothing, what we want to do is we want to layer and we want to avoid sweating. If you're sweating, you're going to get your clothes wet, which will only wick away warmth from your body. Now, when it comes to layering your clothing, what I do is I start with a liner, something like, the synthetic pants. These are just, your basic long johns, and then a long sleeve upper, just liner that I wear on, again, my upper body. Now, as far as what I layer on top of that, obviously we work up to pants, and I've got some pants in here. I keep these in our emergency go bag. These, again, are a synthetic material that I can, throw over on top of the liner, and then a t-shirt that goes over my long sleeve shirt. Now, as far as we've now created, a second layer. And then when we start talking about the third layer, for me, what I do is I go with a fleece jacket. This is just something I picked up at a garage sale. It's a military surplus fleece jacket. And then on top of that, I use a basic windbreaker, rain resistant, kind of like a ski jacket from North Face. I've had this for 20 some odd years. But whenever I'm out in cold conditions, I just layer up, and as I get warm, I can peel off a layer at a time as needed. Obviously, you want to have some type of cap to go on your head. I just have a fleece cap here and gloves. And the last item, of course, is socks, some kind of a thick, material. I forget what these are called. I'll have to put a link in the description section below. I did some research and came up with these socks a while back. And then, again, there are new advances in technology that have electrical clothing on the market. I don't live in an area that really justifies buying something like that because it just doesn't get that cold. Now, the other item when we talk about clothing, we have to discuss, of course, some type of boots or shoes that are designed for cold weather. Of course, if you don't have any boots on hand, wear what you have. But I have these with all our emergency go equipment that we have in the garage so that if we had to head out quickly, we could. Now, one note about boots or whatever you have, if we're heading into winter, I usually go through, clean them off, and then spray them down with a waterproofing material so that if we're in a rain season, they're good to go. Shelter. The first item that we'll discuss is a tent. This is a basic 4-man tent I've had for about 10 years. Why do we want a tent? Well, what you can do is if you retreat to a smaller room where you're creating your own kind of controllable environment, you can set this up and then you have essentially a shelter within a shelter. You can create a small microclimate that you can get into, and again, it allows you to just control that environment over a larger room if the temperature begins to drop, especially at night. Now, speaking of going into a smaller environment, this is why I also keep plastic sheeting, something like a painter's just sheeting. I picked this up at Home Depot. Something like a tarp. Well, let's talk about the plastic sheet first. This allows us to seal off windows that maybe are drafty, or if we have doors that we're getting a lot of drafts. The point is, we want to be able to control and seal off certain areas where there's an exchange between hot air and cold air. The other thing is, if you have a room that you want to use and you're saying, hey, I just want to retreat to this small room, but maybe the area leading in doesn't have a door, well, you can just hang these up on the wall and create, again, this small microclimate. Now, also, you're going to need duct tape. I don't know how much duct tape I have around the house. I've got this stuff everywhere. It serves a lot of purposes, but we can use this to seal off that environment. And the last item on this kind of category is just a basic tarp. And again, if you have some type of roof leak, depending on the type of the storm, or if you want to create, again, a microclimate like we talked about a second ago with a tent, you could throw one of these over a table. And again, you're creating that microclimate environment. Again, tarps just serve so many purposes, especially in a disaster situation. Now, we do want to take into account, we just talked about sealing things off. We do want to allow for ventilation to make sure that you have breathable air, especially if we're talking about using things like a stove or some type of lantern, which we'll talk about momentarily. Speaking of tarps, let me just say this one last thing. I don't know how many houses I've seen whenever the storms pass through my area, and whether a roof gets damaged or someone has a leak, you'll sometimes, not all the time, see people going out and putting this up on the roof. So again, we're just kind of getting ahead of potential problems when we talk about a storm situation. Now, the last item in this category is an aluminum bubble wrap. When I did this video last year in the comments section, a lot of people pointed out, hey, when you recommend this video again in the future, make sure you talk about bubble wraps, especially aluminum. You can use this to quickly insulate your home by taping it to windows, creating a reflective vapor barrier. Now, again, I've got a lot of feedback from my community that these are useful to put in things like their apartments or vehicles to either keep the heat out or the warmth inside. So definitely don't overlook something like this. Just keep it on standby, and if the disaster situation is such that you're without any type of heating or cooling, or heating in this particular case, this will allow you to really create just another layer of insulation for you. Tools. The first items we'll discuss are propane tanks. We've got the small portable canisters here. We've got the kind that we can take down and get it recharged at our local hardware store. You've of course got the larger ones for cooking stoves, outdoor cooking stoves. But if you anticipate having a potential long freeze, these fuel sources are great because they can store for a very long time. I've got some in my garage that have been there for years, pull them out and still work great. They're designed technically to last around 20 to 25 years. So it's my favorite fuel source, because it just stores so well and it's there if you need it. Now, the next item that we're going to talk about is a heater. Now, this one is a Mr. Heater Buddy. These are very, very popular for a lot of reasons. They're small, they're portable, they can produce a good amount of heat. Again, tie this in with the canister on the side, screw it on. Now, you can actually tie these onto the larger tanks with a hose, but you need to get a fuel regulator and filter. I've had people comment on videos explain that if you hook these up together, you can sometimes plug these up due to some of the material inside of this that you, again, want to use a filter to make sure this doesn't get plugged. Now, when we talk about running this indoors, you got to be very careful. These are designed to output carbon dioxide as a byproduct. It's carbon monoxide that we want to be careful with. That's the stuff that you get in, it's toxic and can be fatal. So these have a sensor inside that whenever the oxygen in the surrounding environment gets low, they'll shut off. Now, as with all things when it comes to health and safety, I always make sure that I have multiple fail-safe devices or ways to protect. So that's why at the beginning of the video we talked about a carbon monoxide alarm. So if I were operating something like this inside, I would have that carbon monoxide next to it, and I would have this next to a cracked window or some way where I can get, an airflow exchange. Again, just be careful if you're using these inside. Now, on the subject of burning anything inside, this is our traditional, kind of camping stove. I've had this one for about 17 years or so, and they're not designed to be operated inside because the byproduct of the burner is carbon monoxide. Whenever we burn this, we get carbon monoxide as a byproduct. These have a device, or rather a way to change that over to carbon dioxide. These do not. So you do not want to cook indoors with these. You want to use these outside. Now, for whatever reason you decide I'm going to use this indoors because I don't want people smelling the food that I'm cooking, and OPSEC issues. So in that scenario, we want to, again, make sure that we have a good exchange, airflow, a cracked window. Don't burn this inside without, being able to do that. If you feel yourself getting dizzy, lightheaded, shut it off. Just don't take a chance. Again, have that carbon monoxide alarm nearby. If you do use this, probably would want to use it on some type of cooking surface like a stove top, maybe a pan or something that you can elevate this and keep it off the surface. I one time used one of these on top of a table, a fold-out plastic table, and it burned it up pretty well. So just be careful with that. Now, on the discussion of cooking, let's talk about really quickly fire starters. My encouragement is don't overcomplicate this. Just get a basic lighter. This is a Bic lighter, BIC. In the past, whenever I've talked about lighters, I've had a lot of people in the comments section say, hey, get a Bic lighter, I'm a smoker, and this is the way to go, they're the best lighters. I'll take their advice on that one. Traditional matches. I mean, again, I've got these all over the house. They're 99 cents for a box of these, and don't need to get exotic, any type of waterproof matches or anything. These are just, just the kind that I store here at my house. Now, as far as the other tool that I would want to discuss is an emergency radio. Now you're going to notice that this is actually a hand crank radio. Apart from the obvious uses of getting information, being able to understand, if the internet's down or maybe our phone's down, and knowing what's going on in the world around us, getting and receiving this information with a hand crank radio, I think is valuable. Why a hand crank? Well, obviously we can power this up, charge the battery. These have these little solar options on the top. I don't know how effective they are, honestly, but this one also has a flashlight built in. It's got a lot of uses, but as I mentioned a second ago, it's got a place where I can plug in my phone on the back. If for whatever reason you still are getting cell signals in your area and you just want a cheap option to be able to hand crank this, plug it into the USB and charge it up, there you go, you get that option. So these are the basic minimal tools I would recommend. Power. It goes without saying that most of us in our modern life, we are dependent in one way or another on power sources. So let's go through some different options and talk about how they would fit into this equation. The first one is batteries. I have these in our laundry room, a Battery Daddy as it's called. I believe I picked this up on Amazon or Costco. But essentially, I can just keep batteries stored in here. I see how much I have. Whenever I need more, I just buy more. Again, in a disaster situation where the power's down, trying to find, hey, where's the batteries to power such and such device would be very problematic. Now the next item, we talked about this a second ago, I won't go through it again, but a basic hand crank radio, being able to crank it. We've got USB plugins here in the back so that we could charge things up. I mean, you could even charge up a battery bank that, I carry these around to power my cell phones whenever I'm out somewhere and I'm out of juice. So again, just having these options to create power and also to store it. Now, when we talk about also another option for producing power, if you don't want to spend a lot of money, you can get these, 28 watt solar panels for about 50 bucks, I want to say. And these actually have USB chargers, so you can just lay this out. You can easily charge up your phone or charge up something small like this, a little battery bank. Now that's on the small end of side of things. Whenever you get into larger capabilities to produce power, getting into something like a solar, which we call in our industry solar generator, sometimes called power stations. If you combine this with solar panels, and I've done, I don't know how many videos on these because they're fascinating, they can do a lot of things, but being able to plug this into solar panels, charging it, and then this will allow you to run basic household devices. And on that note, make sure that you have an extension cord, preferably something with multiple plugins, or have some type of power strip that you can plug into a extension cord with just a single plug-in on the end if you're going to be powering multiple devices. Now, an option of course is a gas generator, some type of like a dual fuel or tri-fuel, gasoline, propane. That's what I keep in my garage, and another one, a bigger backup one for our house, because they just store a lot better, especially propane, not having to worry about the gas going bad over time. So I'll provide links to playlists talking about various solar generators. In short, if you're in the market, the ones I typically recommend at this time of recording the video is EcoFlow. They have got a lot of phenomenal products. And again, I'll post a link out to a comparison video that I did this year comparing the different models on the market. Food and water. A lot of times when we discuss winter power outages, most people assume, well, hey, water will still be operational, right? I mean, even if the power goes out, I'll still be able to get water. Maybe. If the pumps go down or the lines freeze over, well, you're not going to be having running water. So when I first started getting serious with emergency preparedness, I started off with these 5-gallon containers. This one right here, it's stackable, some are not, and I like it because I can put multiple in a closet and just tuck them away in a dark area, and they're good for years. And I keep several of these on standby, again, if we have to head out and leave. They're very easy to pick up and take with us. Now, in a disaster situation, we want to move these water containers into our warm area, the microclimate area that we created, because they're going to retain heat in our environment that if we retreat to a small room. So we just want to make sure we keep these around us so they don't freeze up. Now, when we talk about water containers, just a small, we'll transition to food here in a second, but even having hot beverages that you can heat up, maybe hot cocoa for the extra calories that you're going to be exerting as your body is trying to stay warm, and it's a comfort food. Speaking of food, let's talk about the different options. I mean, in the emergency preparedness community, there's a lot of different options. Usually what I recommend starting out is freeze dry. They're pretty easy. You just heat up water, put it inside, and in about 6 to 7 minutes, you got a good nutritional meal. Obviously, there's things like MREs, there's survivor bars. I don't know how long I would want to be dependent upon these, but they're going to give you the calories. Now, you may be saying, well, these aren't exactly the kind of the perfect meals, nutritional, etc. I mean, freeze-dried foods are pretty good for that. But again, remember, we're just trying to find easy food that doesn't take a lot of time to cook, prepare, not needing a lot of dishes to clean up. We don't need to expend a lot of energy having to, use a stove that we could use for heating or other important things, because you're on a limited source depending on how much you have. Now, obviously, we can get into canned foods, things, just basic stuff that you can store away for several years and rotate it as you need it, or, give it away to a food, local food bank if they are getting a little older. Chili, Spam, I mean, you can go on and on. These items that really require no cooking and no prepping, that are just, you can heat them up, or if it came down to it, just eat it right out of the can. So again, we just want basic, easy calories, and just to keep ourselves warm food ideally. Now, this last one I included in this food category. I know it's not food, but some type of wet wipes. These are antimicrobial wet wipes. These are individual ones that you can pick up, or even basic hand sanitizer. Why did I bring these up? Well, remember, when we're in a disaster situation, maybe water's not as, there's not as much water as we'd like to do things like washing our hands. Yeah, let's keep our personal hygiene up. At a minimum, keep your hands clean, especially whenever you're eating food. The last thing you want to do in a disaster situation like this is begin to develop illnesses, which can cascade into a whole new set of problems. So let's, make sure you have that on standby as well. So overall, this is what I would consider the valuable items to have. And again, your need for, or rather your selection of food will vary, but just remember, try to keep it simple, not a lot of cooking and cleaning, and not a lot of energy expenditure to heat it up and to cook it. Lighting. For this last category, let's talk about a few different options. Over the last few years, I've kind of transitioned all my lights over to LED rechargeable. In the past, I used to have, standard lights with ones that you would swap out the batteries. We talked earlier about having batteries on standby, but due to the fact that I have various power backup sources, just having that USB rechargeable option for me just makes a lot of sense. I use it and then I recharge it. Whether that's a standard just flashlight. Again, these things, it's amazing how small they've gotten and how powerful they are. I can plug this in and recharge it as well. Some that I have are battery operated, like this lantern I want to say we picked up at Costco. Just unscrew the bottom and swap out the actual batteries. Now this one's kind of unique. It's actually solar powered. So you can recharge it with USB plug-ins, but you can also set it out and charge it in the sun during the day. So pretty smart little device. Now for years when I go camping, I took my traditional, propane lantern that just screws onto the top of one of these. I have a lot of these around for different purposes for cooking that we talked about earlier. So I like to make sure that I have devices that can, plug into whatever the, fuel sources that I've got. So this is just an option if you want it. Definitely lights up an area very quickly. Now, I know we've covered a lot in this video. Hopefully it gave you a lot of good insight. If you have any feedback or any thoughts, feel free to post it below. I've always learned so much from the community, and each year as I go through and update these videos, I usually go back and look at what the community has to say. I would also encourage you to check out the video that I'll post a link to up here on the screen, and it goes into actual things that you need to know to prepare for a winter disaster, apart from just having the items on standby, what you would need to do, the actions you need to take. And again, I would encourage you to watch that video. As always, stay safe out there.